For today's video, I'm going to be sharing my favourite low maintenance aquarium plants. These are all incredibly easy to care for and will grow perfectly fine without CO2 injection or liquid fertilizers or any expensive lighting. First up is Bacopa caroliniana, and it's the stem plant that I've placed on both sides of the background of my Wallstad guppy tank. It's by far the slowest growing stem plant I've ever kept, and I usually only trim it once every 3 to 6 months depending on how much I trim it back on the previous maintenance session. Bacopa caroliniana can easily get to over 30 centimeters or 12 inches if you just leave it to grow out, so it's perfect for the background of your tank. However, thanks to its slow growth rate, this means you can also use it in the mid-ground if you're willing to stay on top of trimming. I've grown this in 2 separate tanks, both of them using low-powered, budget-friendly aquarium lighting without any issues at all. It's native to the southeastern United States, and initially I did think it would need warmer water temperatures, but I kept it at 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit last winter without any issues. Next up are red root floaters, and as the name suggests, these float on the surface of your aquarium. One of the standout features of this plant is its ability to develop beautiful red hues under the right conditions. I currently have this in a few of my tanks, and 2 of them use Chihiros A2 lights. These are definitely on the higher end of the entry-level price point, but they've done a great job of bringing out those red colours very quickly. But I'm also testing it under the more affordable Ciora SR616 light, and it is starting to colour up. On top of that, I've only had it in the tank with the Ciora light for a week, while I've had it in the tanks with the Chihiros lights for almost a month now, so it may colour up to the same coloration. Unlike most floating plants which tend to grow quickly, red root floaters are the slowest growing floating plants I've ever kept by far. As I just mentioned, I've had them in the tanks under the Chihiros lights for just under a month now, and I haven't had to remove any of the excess plant matter yet. At their current growth rate, I do expect to need to trim them back roughly every 8 weeks or so, depending how much of the plant I leave in the tank. Next up is Echinodorus aquatica, and I know that a lot of people just class all Echinodorus plants as being low maintenance, but aquatica takes this to the next level. Unlike a lot of Echinodorus species that can grow very tall and dominate your tank, aquatica stays compact and usually maxes out at around 20 centimeters or 8 inches. This makes it an excellent choice for a mid-ground tank in a lot of tank setups, but it can also work as a background tank in smaller nano tanks too. As a rosette plant, it does produce new leaves constantly, but rather than trimming the older outer leaves from the plant, I just leave them to decay on their own, reducing maintenance even further. If you keep shrimp and snails in your tank like I do, then they'll happily clean up those decaying leaves and use them as a natural food source. I've had this plant in various different tanks for over 2 years now, and honestly I can't even remember trimming it once. I know some plant nurseries list this as a medium difficulty plant that requires a moderate light intensity, but I've always kept it under entry level LED lights without issue. Moving on, and we get to Bucephalandra, which is endemic to the island of Borneo, meaning it doesn't naturally grow anywhere else on the planet. This is an epiphyte plant, which means you don't plant it in the substrate, you mount it to hardscapes such as driftwood or rocks in your aquarium. Now there's a bunch of different varieties of this in the hobby, ranging from a height size of around 5 centimeters up to 20 centimeters, which converts to 2 to 8 inches. In my experience, once Bucephalandra reaches its maximum height, it simply stops growing vertically, but its rhizome will continue to grow horizontally slowly and then kick up some new leaves from there. The one that I'm showing in this clip is Bucephalandra kedagang, and I've had it for almost 2 years now. I haven't noticed it grow much taller than it currently is in the last few months, so I'm guessing it's at its maximum height, and I've never had to trim it once in 2 years. Kedagang is one of the taller and faster grown varieties by Bucephalandra standards. The majority of them are smaller than this and a lot slower grown. I've grown a bunch of different varieties of Bucephalandra under entry-level affordable aquarium lighting without issue, and it's consistently been a very easy plant for me to grow, but I do have a pH of 6.4, a GH of 4 and a KH of 3 in my tap water. Even though this is native to the tropical waters of Borneo, it easily handled the winter temperatures here in the UK in my room temperature White Cloud Mountain minnow tank, what dropped to around 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter. Next up we have Marsilea hirsuta, and I know this one's a little hard to spot because the dwarf Sagittaria is dominating this tank, but it's a smaller carpeting plant that I'll do my best to get some good clips of. As a carpeting plant, Marsilea hirsuta is best placed in the foreground of your aquarium, where it will start to slowly creep out and start to carpet the foreground, but it's a very slow grower. That does mean it's very low maintenance too, but it also means that it will take a while to carpet the aquarium that you place it in, especially if you have a medium or large size tank, so getting multiple pots of it will help that. Again, I'm growing this under an entry-level affordable light without issue, and the plant just grows. Now this is native to Australia, but it's actually an invasive species here in the United Kingdom, and it's been fine in my room temperature tanks and kept growing throughout the winter at a temperature of 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. But now we're in the summer months, its growth rate really hasn't sped up with the warmer temperatures, it just consistently grows slow. Next up is Anubias, and I know this is an obvious choice for a lot of the more experienced planted tank keepers, but a lot of people new to the planted tank side of the hobby watch my videos, so I needed to include this. In my opinion, if you are just getting started in the hobby, then Anubias is easily one of the best plants to keep because it's so hardy. One of the main advantages of Anubias is its very slow growth rate, which means it's extremely low maintenance, but it also means it really doesn't need many nutrients in the water column to grow a healthy, thriving plant. Like Bucephalandra, Anubias is also an epiphyte plant, so you'll want to attach this to rocks or driftwood in your tank rather than bury it in the substrate. Now there's a bunch of different species within the Anubias genus, and some of them convert to submerged life a lot easier than others, so personally I'd always recommend you stick with varieties from the Anubias barteri group. I have a dedicated blog post going over some of my favourite Anubias barteri varieties, which I link in the description, but these tend to be very easy to convert to submerged life, making them very beginner friendly and very low maintenance. Anubias is native to West Africa, but again I've been able to keep this in some of my room temperature aquariums through the winter at 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit without issue. And just like Marsilea hirsuta, I really haven't noticed any difference in the growth rate between it being in my cooler water temperature tanks and my tropical water temperature tanks. Next up is Sterigani repens, and I don't have any of this in any of my current tanks, but I do have some older footage when I did have it, but the footage might not be focusing on the plant, so bear with it. Although this is technically a stem plant, Sterigani repens stays compact and maxes out at around 10 centimeters or 4 inches. Then, instead of just continuing to grow tall, it starts to slowly throw up surrounding stems to make a little bushy appearance. This makes it a great option for the mid-ground and smaller nano tanks or the foreground and medium and large aquariums. Now the Denelay Plant Nursery currently class this as a medium difficulty plant, while Tropica list it as an easy category plant, and I definitely side with Tropica on this one. Sterigani repens has been very easy to grow in my aquariums under entry-level aquarium lights, and it hasn't had any issues with that setup. But if your Sterigani repens comes in an in vitro cup rather than the potted variety, it can be weaker, so I would recommend you wait until your tank is cycled and your ammonia levels are stable in the aquarium before you add it to prevent it melting. Now this plant is native to South America, but unlike some of the other tropical plants I've featured where I've kept it successfully in my room temperature tanks, my Sterigani repens did melt in my room temperature tanks during the winter, so only keep it in your tropical setups. Next up is Ludwigia mini super red, and this is one of the easiest stem plants in the hobby. From what I understand, this exact same plant is sold under different names, but the Aquaflora Plant Nursery sell it as Ludwigia mini super red. I know that this looks similar to Ludwigia rubin, but they are different species with slightly different requirements, with Ludwigia mini super red being easier to keep, so don't get them confused. This is a stem plant that can get over 30 centimeters or 12 inches tall if you just leave it to grow, but like most red plants, it is a little bit more demanding and it tends to have a slower growth rate in a low-tech tank. In my experience, I usually trim it every 8 to 16 weeks depending on the lighting of that tank and the available nutrients in the aquarium. One thing to keep in mind with this plant is the intensity of your lighting, and that does play a role in how red it will get. I'm growing this one under a Ciora SR657, which has a similar light intensity to a Haiga 957 or a Haiga 76, but you can see those deep red hues coming through. This is the exact same plant taken from the exact same cuttings kept under a Ciora SR616, which is an entry level light, and you can see the difference in its colour, and it's more of a brown or orange. Trimming is a little bit more difficult too, because rather than just trimming the tops off the stems like the other stem plants featured in the video, personally I choose to uproot the entire plant because being Ludwigia, it does drop a lot of the leaves off the bottom part of the stem. Then I'll trim the healthy parts off the top and replant the healthy bits into the substrate and throw the decaying parts away. Next up is Helenthium telanum green, which is easily one of my favourite low-tech aquarium plants in the hobby. This has always been an extremely easy plant for me to grow regardless of the lighting intensity or water temperature that I keep it in. It just consistently does its thing and carpets out. As a stolon plant, it starts to send out little runners once the plant's established, which then develop small plantlets which then grow into full-blown plants all of its own. They do max out at around 5 centimeters or 2 inches in height, so provided you're keeping it in a tank where it is the smallest aquarium plant in there, you can just leave it to fill out the tank and never do any maintenance on it. But if you are keeping this in an aquarium that has other smaller plants, maybe something like Cryptococcus albida brown or something small like that, where you actually want to be able to see it, you may want to do some maintenance on the plant, but that will be a rare situation. Although there is a random patch in the middle of my room temperature White Cloud Mountain minnow tank where it hasn't actually carpeted properly yet, the rest of the tank is pretty much done considering it's a low-tech aquarium with low-powered lighting, no CO2 injection, and no liquid fertilizer. Just keep in mind that it will send out runners in every direction, so eventually they'll start going towards the back of the tank, but in most cases this really shouldn't be an issue, and I plan to just let it do its thing and leave the other plants to grow around it. Next up is Bacopa compact, which is a far shorter cultivar of Bacopa mineri, but unfortunately sometimes the plants can be mislabeled. Similar to Sterigani repens, which I covered earlier, Bacopa caroliniana usually grows to around 10 centimeters or 4 inches and then it just stops growing vertically and throws up other stems to bush out its appearance. I'm a big fan of this plant, but I am mainly on the nano tank side of the hobby where I can use it in a lot more situations, but it can still work in the foreground for medium to large aquariums too. I used to have this in one of my old guppy tanks and I had it for a year in there and I never trimmed it once because the stems really don't get that tall. And just like a lot of the other featured plants, I've always grown this one under entry level lighting too, and I've never had an issue with it. Next up we get to Java Fern, and while this is a popular choice in the hobby, it can be a little more challenging than a lot of people think. Like Anubias and Bucephalandra, Java Fern is also an epiphyte plant, so it should be attached to rocks or driftwood rather than planted in your substrate. There are several varieties available, but in my experience the regular Java Fern or Microsorum terapus is usually the easiest one to keep. Its leaves max out at around 30 centimeters or 12 inches if you just leave it alone, and provided you're keeping it in larger or medium tanks it should never need maintenance. That said, you do need to look out for nutrient deficiencies, and personally I do think I've had potassium deficiencies with mine, but there are other theories out there on why Java Fern can be challenging to keep. This is why I usually lean more towards using Anubias or Bucephalandra as my epiphyte plants of choice, because with my tap water parameters they just grow better than Java Fern. Finally, I do want to touch on Cryptococcus because these are widely considered a low maintenance plant, but if you get the right species of Cryptococcus, because some prefer soft water, some prefer hard water, and your tank's water parameters match up with it, they may grow surprisingly fast. On top of that, some species of Cryptococcus can also send out runners and start spreading into areas of your tank where you may not want them to. So while cryptocorynes can be low maintenance plant, they are not always low maintenance plant, and there's a few different variables at play there, so I didn't really want to include it as a proper entry, but I did want to mention it. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for watching and good luck with your low maintenance planted tanks.